On the night of October 4th, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, together with the insurgent movement Black Spark, attacked the Kryzhynefteorg-Syntez oil refinery. This is located in the Leningrad region of Russia. It produces fuel and petrochemicals. It is also one of the largest in the country. The plant's capacity exceeds 20 million tons of oil per year. According to the Special Operations Forces, the strike targeted key units for primary oil processing and the production of chemical components. As a result, a large-scale fire broke out. This is already the third incident at the plant in 2025. The attack was carefully planned and coordinated with representatives of the resistance. The fire was confirmed by both local residents and regional authorities. Russia's oil revenues in September decreased by 20% compared to the previous year. This was reported by Bloomberg agency. The government expects that oil and gas revenues to the budget in 2025 will be the lowest since the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to strikes by Ukrainian defense forces on Russian oil refineries, Moscow is forced to buy gasoline from Belarus. Andrei Dmitrenko will tell you more.
Ukrainian drones attacked the oil refinery in Orsk-Orenburg region, according to sources in the Security Service of Ukraine. Several explosions occurred on the territory of the Orsk-Nefteorg-Syntez plant, according to local residents on social media. The refinery processed 6,600,000 tons of oil per year. The plant produces gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation kerosene, and fuel oil. In recent years, the Russian authorities have invested heavily in expanding the facility.
The main facility of the Orsk refinery modernization program, the hydrocracking complex, was brought into technological operation and achieved guaranteed performance indicators at the end of August 2018. The investment in the construction of the complex amounted to about 40 billion rubles. Both own and borrowed funds were used for financing. The total cost of the plant's modernization program is about $1,300,000, from a publication on the website of the National Association of Oil and Gas Service of the Russian Federation.
On October 1st, a fire broke out at the Novoyaroslavl oil refinery. Local authorities immediately began assuring residents that drones had nothing to do with it and that this was a man-made incident. But in any case, judging by the scale of the fire, the enterprise suffered significant damage. The Novoyaroslavl plant is among the 5 largest Russian oil refineries by fuel processing volume. Attacks by the Ukrainian Defense Forces on oil refining facilities in the aggressor country have led to a 20% drop in tax revenues from the oil and gas sector in Russia for September compared to the figures for 2024, according to Bloomberg.
The decline in revenues from the oil industry, which together with gas accounted for a quarter of Russia's budget this year, is putting pressure on the state treasury. As Moscow continues to spend significant funds to finance the 4th year of the war in Ukraine, the government already expects that oil and gas revenues going into the budget this year will be the lowest since the pandemic in 2020. Oil-related taxes experienced a significant drop by almost exactly 20%, falling to a total of 483.5 billion rubles just last month. Meanwhile, total oil and gas revenues also saw a substantial decline by 25%, reaching 582.5 billion rubles overall, from a Bloomberg agency publication.
However, the consequences of the strikes on oil refineries go far beyond the oil and gas sector. All sectors of the economy depend on fuel supplies, especially in such a vast country as Russia. If the authorities are unable to restore fuel supplies in the near future, the aggressor country faces a slowdown in economic activity and a sharp rise in prices for goods.
Currently, logistics in Russia have slowed down more than tenfold since the beginning of the military actions in Ukraine in 2022. So just so you understand, I follow these public pages because I'm really interested in this. And I can tell you that in these small shops, these kiosks, fresh bread is disappearing, and you can only buy eggs when they're delivered. Yes, so people there buy eggs once every 2 weeks. Russia already had a problem with logistics. Their average logistical speed for moving goods and services across Russia was 4 kilometers per hour.
Until December 31st, 2025, there is a ban on fuel exports in the Federation. According to the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service, Russia is systematically increasing its fuel purchases from Belarus. Between July and September of 2025, the aggressor country imported 97,000 tons of fuel, 1/3 more than during the same period in 2024. But Minsk does not have enough resources to cover its neighbor's deficit. That is why Moscow is considering buying gasoline from China.
Supplies are also being sent to China via the Shadow Fleet. However, this is done through cabotage transshipments of crude oil from ships flying the Chinese flag, from vessels of the Shadow Fleet under various flags. and it then enters as Chinese oil, which they import into their country as if it comes from other fields, even though it is actually Russian oil. However, China's rapidly developing economy also does not allow it to supply its fuel resources to the Russian Federation.
According to the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, in September, 38% of the oil refining capacity in the aggressor country was idle, and the fuel deficit amounted to about 20% of domestic demand. Andriy Dmitrenko for Freedom TV channel.
Danish military intelligence has accused the Russian naval forces of repeated provocations in the straits that connect the Baltic Sea with the North Sea. The director of Danish military intelligence, Thomas Orienkel, stated that Russian ships have repeatedly engaged in aggressive actions, in particular aiming weapons at Danish aircraft and ships, performing dangerous maneuvers that nearly led to collisions and also jamming navigation systems. In addition, Russian ships deliberately chose courses that created a risk of collision with Danish vessels. In Denmark, this is seen as a signal from Russia indicating its readiness to use force if Denmark decides to restrict the movement of the so-called shadow fleet. Europe must take seriously the existential threat posed by Russia. This was stated by Ukraine's first deputy foreign minister Serhiy Kyslytsya in an interview with The Guardian. According to him, without a decisive response from Europe and the US, the Kremlin dictator will continue to escalate. Kyslytsya is convinced that Moscow is already at war with Europe, and that the recent incursions of Russian drones into the airspace of several EU countries were well calculated and were an attempt to shift the red lines.
I am convinced that Putin derives emotional, if not physical, pleasure from insulting the West, showing off what he considers his superpower. Many politicians are still thinking in patterns and algorithms of the past. In the 21st century, you don't need tanks to bring technologically advanced countries to their knees. Cyber warfare is a reality. You don't need howitzers to paralyze the banking system. By skillfully using drones, you can achieve your goals more effectively than with a nuclear bomb. Serhiy Kyslytsya, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, in an interview with The Guardian.
23 flights were rerouted, 12 were cancelled, and another 46 departures were delayed. Munich airport once again suspended operations due to the appearance of drones in German airspace. The federal police detected 2 UAVs during the night, and according to Bild, these were military reconnaissance drones. Amid the increasing incidence of violations of European countries' airspace, the German Minister of the Interior announced that he would push for a law allowing the armed forces to shoot down drones. My colleague Nikita Skoblikov will continue on this topic.
Europe must take seriously the threat from Russia, which continues to wage a hybrid war against it, said Ukraine's first Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kyslytsya in an interview with The Guardian. He is convinced that cyber attacks and violations of European countries' airspace are part of the Kremlin's strategy. This is how Moscow tests the West's response and probes the limits of what is permissible. In the Russian perception, the war with Europe is already underway, just in a hybrid form for now. And such provocations, including the use of drones, are an attempt by the Kremlin to shift the so-called red lines, the diplomat asserts.
I'm certain that Putin derives emotional, if not physical, satisfaction from humiliating the West, showing off what he considers his superpower. In the 21st century, you don't need tanks to bring technologically advanced countries to their knees. Cyber warfare is a reality. You don't need howitzers to paralyze the banking system. By skillfully using drones, you can achieve your goals even more effectively than with a nuclear bomb. Serhiy Kyslytsya, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, in an interview with The Guardian.
On the night of September 4th, Prague police reported that they had launched a special operation at the capital's airport due to information about approaching drones. To monitor the airspace at low and medium altitudes, they used radars located at stationary military posts.
The drone incursions we've been witnessing over the past few weeks are essentially a kind of test of how the authorities, especially the police and military, respond to such threats. The question is how to properly detect them in the future and how to deal with them, because constant tests are probably not what we need in the coming weeks.
Another European city affected by a drone incursion is Munich. The city airport has been closed for the second time recently. Police reported that after being detected, the drones turned around and disappeared, so they could not be identified. According to Bild, these were military reconnaissance drones. To avoid wasting time on identification in the future and to immediately shoot down violators, the head of the German Interior Ministry announced that he would submit a corresponding bill to Parliament.
We
will create a new unit within the federal police that will deal exclusively with drone defense issues and will also include research and development departments that will compete in the field of drone defense in close cooperation with our partners, including Israel and Ukraine. The fact that we have to take into account such a wide range of possibilities from civilian pre-war drones which have already been spotted in neighboring European countries forces us to make decisions that allow the Bundeswehr to be used to prevent danger.
Recently, there has been an increase in cases of illegal airspace violations by drones in Europe. Airports are being shut down from Norway to Spain. According to the Telegraph's calculations, in September at least 14 European airports temporarily suspended operations due to the intrusion of unidentified drones. As a result, hundreds of flights were delayed. Analysts explain that this is a challenge not only for security but also for the economy.
When thousands and thousands of passengers and planes can't fly, it's not just a logistical problem. This leads to personal and perhaps professional issues for those affected. And then there are all sorts of compensations from airlines and so on. In other words, we're talking about millions in expenses just for this alone. Not to mention the billions, tens of billions in fact, that all European countries now have to spend. This is essentially unproductive capital, but it's necessary for the protection of their own security, as well as, of course, Ukraine's.
Ukraine is ready to share its experience in countering Russian drones with its European partners. For example, in Denmark, during an exchange of combat experience as part of a visit by a Ukrainian delegation, Ukrainian soldiers successfully neutralized several drones in the country's airspace. According to a statement from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, representatives from various European countries were invited to the demonstration, where they had the opportunity to witness the effectiveness of Ukrainian solutions in countering aerial threats. Nikita Skoblikov for Freedom TV Channel.
The European Union is preparing legal grounds to stop tankers from Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. This was reported by the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, on Telegram. This concerns at least 16 flagless vessels that may be detained in accordance with Article 110 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Yermak emphasized that it is necessary to restrict Russia's capabilities as quickly as possible.
In the new 19th package of sanctions, the EU plans to add another 120 oil tankers from Russia's shadow fleet, increasing its blacklist to 568 vessels. Some of them formally no longer enter EU ports, but continue to use the Baltic Sea for transportation. The use of international law mechanisms and the willingness of NATO countries to ensure their enforcement is a key signal to the Kremlin. Its attempts to circumvent sanctions are not working. It is necessary to restrict Russia's capabilities more quickly. Moscow is already waging a hybrid war against Europe, and in this context, speed plays a crucial role. Andriy Yermak, head of the office of the President of Ukraine, on Telegram.